and welcome to another episode of Gossip Finance, where I'm your host, Alacia Singer.
And I'm Duncan Sandlin. How's everybody today? How are you, Lacey?
Excellent. I'm excited today to play a little catch-up. There keep being all these things we're not getting to,
Right.
And let's hit some of the stuff that we find the most fun, like talk a little bit about your wallet. What do you think?
Yeah. We skipped some finance stuff because we had to cover all the Trump stuff, and we'll cover a little bit of that today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what's going on with finance economically, with people, with personal finance. And there's a couple trends that are happening within the generations. And we'll talk about the millennials first, and then we'll go into Gen X and what's happening to them, because that's going to eventually happen to the millennials who follow Gen X, right? So the millennials, between whatever it is, what is it, 29 and like 30 or 43 or 44 or something like that, 40. So that generation, my generation, gets shit on a lot. But kind of understanding that we went through some economic distress in the beginning of our adulthood, which was kind of unique. And we were the first generation in history to make less money than our parents, factoring in for inflation and all that. And that kind of affects now how we vote, how we think about things, how we purchase, because we tend to be a lot more frugal. It's kind of like, you hear stories about people that grew up in the Great Depression being extremely frugal, even, during booming economic times, because they're paranoid it could always go back, right? So you get some of that with the millennial generation. But there's a guy, Scott Galloway, he was on The View. He had an interesting book. It wasn't a great book, but it was okay. But he did make an interesting point. He's on The View, and they're going to talk about it. So here's Scott Galloway on The View with Whoopi Goldberg and the crew there. Oops.
Best-selling author, entrepreneur, and professor Scott Galloway has been making headlines for warning that the U.S. economy is setting young people up for failure. But he's also providing some solutions with his new book, The Algebra of Wealth, the simple formula for the financial security. Please welcome Scott Galloway.
Yes.
Alyssa has the first question.
So, Scott, I'm so glad to have you here. You're a very successful entrepreneur, highly regarded professor of marketing.
Go on.
And my favorite co-podcaster with Kara Swisher.
Yeah.
I listen to you all the time. I'm such a fan of your insight. And what you delve into something so important in this book. You call it the war on the young in this country. Mm-hmm. You say that the U.S. is destroying young people's futures in some ways. Can you talk about that?
I think ground zero for what ails America is that for the first time in our nation's history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents at the age of 30. Mm-hmm. That's the first time that creates rage and shame in every household. The average 7-year-old is 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. The average person under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy. What's the result? People are opting out of America. It used to be 63% of 30 to 34-year-old able-bodied people had kids. Now it's 27%. And I don't think it's because they've decided they don't want kids. I think it's because they've decided, well, we haven't raised minimum wage in 40 years, all the tax cuts go to older people. The largest capital transfer in history happens every year. Young people transfer $1.5 trillion to the wealthiest generation in history, and that's seniors. Young people aren't entitled. They're entitled to be enraged.
So I think that's a great point. And that's the problem is that especially millennials, Gen X to a certain degree too, and now Gen Alpha a little bit, all of our money is going to our parents, to the boomers. And they were the wealthiest generation in the history of this country. And they're still getting all of our money. So it's socialism for the elderly and the old that already have the money. And it's capitalism for the rest of us, which is why a lot of us is just sort of checked out.
Well, and also he brings up sort of another interesting point about the choice not to have children and what some of that is about. It also relates to what we keep hearing about housing, is that a lot of millennials feel like they've been priced out of that. They don't think home ownership is really a thing they can do. And I feel like that same idea transfers on to what people feel capable of doing in terms of having families. Is it about, one's personal goals and desire, or are they just looking around situationally and being like, I don't know how I can juggle all of this financially?
Right. So you got to remember this. So just to focus on the mental attitude, to sort of illustrate on your point. When you talk about the boomers, they were coming up in their adult years, were the 80s and the 90s, which were the 20 the biggest growth years in the economy. And they were huge, and women just started joining the workforce and getting into more management, middle management positions. And it was, the dot-com era, and things were great. And they kept voting and voting and voting for things like what they called neoliberalism and neoconservatism, this deregulation of the markets, deregulation of all this stuff, so we can have more opportunity to make more. And they put everything on credit, and they get all these debts and everything. And then what ended up happening was when Bush was president, but part of it's his fault, part of it was Clinton, deregulated Glass-Steagall and all that. It got to the point where you had recession after recession after recession because these people thought they could just grow their way out of any problem. We can run up the credit card, our personal credit cards, as much as we want because we're growing so fast it doesn't matter. And they thought that was going to last forever. So they spent way too much. I'm not talking about the government, I'm talking about individuals. Mom and dad, right? They got the huge house and the car and all this, and they got it all on loans and credit. And that's part of what killed them. And it's the one thing, like with Dave Ramsey when he bitches about credit, it's like credit's not a bad thing, it's bad the way people used to use it. And that's how he became famous, was being the guy who yelled against credit. And he wasn't entirely wrong at the time. He is now. He's been wrong about a lot of other things, but that's the mentality. So they came in, so like my parents, oh yeah, I'm doing okay now, I'm going to go buy a $60,000 or $70,000 sports car. As where I'm in this similar position, and I'll sit there and go, ooh, maybe I can get a used sedan that's still in really good shape, right? Or maybe, do I really even need a car? Because then there's gas and insurance, and I got to store the car and pay for parking and cleaning the car and or do I want to use that money for something like, investing for my future, right? So it's interesting because that's part of the problem with marketing going on in business. Now, we've had good sales and record sales and things have been going up. I think that's mostly Generation Alpha and the boomers, because wages have now started to go up, and that was a big thing he pointed out. But wages have been stagnant for a long time. So we got paid less and less and less, even though our productive-wise, the Gen X and then millennials were the most productive generations in the history of this country, and they got paid the least. So they worked the hardest, produced the most, and got paid the least. And now the big debates in Congress are, do we cut their Social Security and their health care? So you can see why a lot of them aren't thrilled, and a lot of them have checked out. I mean,
right.
And he's right. We have a right to be pissed. And it's like, yeah. And I've seen jokes about the only thing boomers and alphas agree on is millennials suck. And it's like, yeah, because we grew up in the shitty times. We have a different mentality about the world.
Well, the funny thing is, one thing that is oftentimes, expressed is a dislike. It's funny, you and I don't fall into the same category.
No.
Hey guys, I'm an Xer, he's a millennial.
Yeah.
We're very close in age, but we're right on the divide.
We're right on the line. Yeah.
So in terms of approximately where I lie, people my age and slightly older than me are being pegged for being sort of checked out. Mm-hmm. I think about where you are gets pegged for being a little checked out too. But like, my God, can you blame any of us? Like, in our age bracket, we've been handed the whole shit storm, and now the next shit storm is now we want to start taking shit away from you in terms of when you can actually get Social Security, if you can get it, how much of it you can get, what age, like. Yeah, right. There's a real reason for us to be tuned in. We've been handed crap, and more crap.
Yeah, and that's the thing is because we fall in that sort of gap area. But, you got to remember, it's like, if you're a millennial or a young Gen Xer, you started your adulthood in the aughts, in the early 2000s. And what happened? Well, we had the 2001 recession, 9/11, the 2002 recession. And then the economy didn't do much better. Next thing you know, we're in the two longest wars in American history simultaneously. That's all getting paid for. They're borrowing a lot of that money out of the Social Security Trust Fund. On top of that fact, you're going to the housing crisis, 5 or 6 years later. So you're an adult trying to start your career, start your life, and it's recession, high unemployment, war, cutting of education funding, especially for men, because they were trying to up military recruitment. So, like, I remember my student loans, I was getting just enough to cover my tuition and books and everything until after the war started, and then my tuition, or my student loans got cut in half. And I had to work 3 jobs to finish college. The last 2 years I was there. I was working 50 hours a week and going to school full time. I was fried. I looked like shit when I finished college. Most of my friends just dropped out and joined the military because that's all they could do. So, I mean, they did that. That's what happened. And that's why you have so many, like, men in my generation that don't have college degrees and a higher number of women that do. Right? I mean, all these things happened, and they happen to your life, and then that it changes the outlook of your life and the course of your life. And a lot of what comes down to with finance, I think people focus too much on money, when it's really what it's about is distribution of resources. And then you have to factor in, how do I want to distribute the resources so I can have more control over my future? And sometimes that means, look, I want the new sports car, but I also want to retire at some point. What's more important? And I think millennials think that way more and more. And they're starting to realize, we might end up working until we die if we don't have some solution here. And that's why I think the idea is like, well, maybe we should think about upping Social Security or getting universal health care, socializing things a little bit more. Was a good idea. And I think that's where Biden's done some smart moves on this, is this idea of, well, maybe we need a wealth tax. Yes, of course we need a wealth tax. Maybe we need to do that to save Social Security. Yeah. Maybe we need to make sure everybody's got health care. Yeah. Maybe we need to start forgiving student loans. Yeah. Yeah. That would solve a lot of our problems. Granted, you're doing it to us now when we're in our, late 30s and 40s, right? But, it would have been better if you'd have done this shit when we were in our 20s. But I can tell you right now.
However, even doing it now, people have the chance to try to salvage their own retirement to a certain degree, as opposed to just keep wading through the shitstorm they've been put in,
Right. And I don't know about the whole outlook of all millennials. I don't speak for all millennials, but I can tell you from my position, it's like, I don't want to see Gen Z and Gen Alpha go through that shit. The housing crisis. I mean, they've already fucking suffered when they were children from the pandemic.
Right.
which Trump totally mishandled. We lost 1 million Americans died. It just damaged our economy. It wasn't until Biden became president and dumped all this money back in that our economy started to jump back. And right now we're kicking the ass of all the other developed nations. We've got a better pandemic recovery. It's still not great. But we'll watch another minute of this. But I think that's the good point to point out, is when you think about your finances going forward from these generational perspectives, you got to think about, okay, what is the future going to potentially look like? And right now, the boomers are still in control. I mean, the president, the guys running for president were born in the 40s. I mean, they're 80. It's like almost a century ago. Might as well elect Count Dracula at this point. So I'll jump into this for a sec.
Are transferring money from the young to the old. It is the least American thing we could do.
Wow. I got a question.
Yeah.
You think the government has something to do with it? Because the government treats us, the taxpayers, like we're a wallet. So there is no money. There's no generational wealth to leave to young. Because I'm sitting watching my money disappear into the hands of other people. What do we do to fix the tax codes so that young people can have that? Because when I was 30, I wasn't making any money either.
Yeah. You bring up an interesting point.
I'm going to jump into that. That is the perspective of a wealthy person wanting to keep their money. They're taking all my money and it's going to other people. Yeah, that's what taxes are, whoopee. And the bottom line is, you didn't have a lot when you were in your 30, but you had a lot more opportunity. Right? Because you think about that, 30 years ago in the 90s, she had a lot more opportunity in the 80s and 90s.
Or at the very least, her general age bracket did.
Well, yeah, well, and think about this. Just like a great example of how this is kind of become a nepotistic sort of inheritance system, right? And how that's changed so quickly because wealthy people are allowed to become wealthy and wealthier and keep their money and just give it to their kids. They have a huge advantage from the get-go. Whoopi's a great example of this. What are the odds in today's just entertainment society in Hollywood that a black woman from nowhere becomes a famous actress and comedian whose parents aren't rich? Almost none. 95% of Hollywood anymore, all those people, their parents were in film industry. They were producers or actors or whatnot.
Right.
95%. What are the odds somebody from nowhere, like Whoopi Goldberg, is going to come in and actually break in? None. Why would I do that when I can get Will Smith's kids?
Right.
See, you created these dynasties, and it's shut everybody else out. That's part of the problem. And she's talking about how do we continue that? And she's not talking about, well, yeah, but how do we distribute the taxes so it'll help the younger generations? And how do we get the money out of these people's hands so there's an equal distribution of opportunity and power? That's how you fix this problem. Otherwise, it's just going to be the rich keep running up the score. And honestly, right now, with the wealth gap the way it is, I mean, if this was a Little League game, we'd have called it already. I mean, the difference between the top 1% and all the rest of us combined, they own more than all the rest of us combined. It's so fucked up. They just don't see it. That's the problem.
Because there's a myth that the rich don't pay their taxes. Actually, super earners, people who have a lot of current income, probably some of the people at this table living in the city, pay upwards of 50% of their taxes.
That's true. It's devastating.
Who gets...
Okay, that's misleading. Here's what it is. Those people do not pay 50% of their money in tax. They pay 50% of the taxes. Okay? Now, that's true, and you might sit there and go, wow, gee, God, they're paying so much. Yeah, but they have so much. If Lacey inherits $1 billion, and I'm working my ass off making $100,000 a year, and I pay $25,000 in tax, right? I'm paying 25% of my income. If Lacey pays 1% of her income, that's $10 million. Well, Lacey paid way more than you did. No, she didn't. She has $1 billion. She didn't pay shit. It's comparative. Right?
Absolutely.
And honestly, $25,000 to somebody who makes $100,000 is a lot of fucking money. $10 million to a billionaire is nothing. It's comparative. That's the thing that's bullshit about that. Yeah, did they pay more dollar-wise? Yeah, because they have all the money. They're hoarding it and keeping it for themselves. That's why we need to tax that shit, to get it back into the system. We're going to talk about growing the economy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, once you make the jump to light speed and become a super owner, you own stocks and real estate, very wealthy people, the 25 wealthiest Americans paid an average tax rate of 8%. Corporations used to pay 3.5% of GDP, now it's 1%. Corporate taxes are the lowest they've been since 1939. So who do you have? You have overtaxation of the super earners, overtaxation of young people, housing's up fourfold, right? Education's up twofold, and they're making less money. So they make less money, and everything's gotten more expensive, and 210 times a day, Whoopi, they get a notification that they are failing, with other people vomiting their faux success in their face. So I'm not doing as well, and yet it seems like everyone else is doing really well. This is a breakdown, and America's not about identifying a superclass of rich kids and freakishly remarkable people and turning them into billionaires. It's about giving the bottom 90 a shot at being in the top 10. We have lost the script.
Yeah, we've lost the plot.
Well, and I think that's even very narrow, because he's trying to sell a book. And he's trying to sell the personal finance dream. This is how you become rich. That's why I was saying his book isn't that great. Because the bottom line is, if it's the top 10%, it's always going to be just 10% of the people. There's never going to be more than 10% in the top 10%. It's a tautology. I mean, it's right, a tautology. It's just stupid.
Way to do math, Duncan. Way to do math.
Right. No, simple. Right. And the thing about it that kills me is what we're talking about. What we should be talking about is not how do we give the bottom 90, sort of the opportunity kind of thing. It's more of what we need to be talking about is how do we raise the standard of living for the bottom 99%. So we don't have a lot of these problems. So they aren't having lower wages and getting priced out. So they have the opportunities to get education and all that stuff. How do we fix that problem? And that's not what he's addressing at all. Because he can't sell that. Right? If I were writing a personal finance book, it'd be like, no, you can do it all on your own. Just believe. Right? You can be rich just like me. And how did I get rich? By telling you I could make you rich and you bought my book, dipshit. That's kind of what he does. But that's my thing. It's like he's hit on some good points. It's amazing. The guy cannot finish a syllogism. Right? Well, let's see. They're making less money. Things are costing more money. What do we need to do? Lower taxes on the rich. That's what he just did.
Yeah, because that definitely helps.
That's what he just did. Let's make it a more progressive tax scale and lower taxes on the poor and raise them on the rich and then distribute more money back down to the poor. He's doing a reverse Robin Hood, and that's what I think is funny. And they're all wealthy women on that show. And they're yeah, this is good, yeah. Because he's telling them what they want to hear. Yeah, the problem is they're not motivated. Yeah, well, why not? Oh, they don't know how to save money or do stuff, blah, blah. No, they're not motivated because they don't have the fucking resources. Give them the resources, you'll be more motivated.
Also, you have to be able to see how something is going to pay off.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just grinding your gears for nothing. Yeah. Sometimes, I'm a teacher by day. Maybe you're noticing student A. Student A doesn't seem particularly motivated. Mm-hmm. If you do a little digging, what you might realize is student A doesn't have much reason to be motivated. Student A can't actually see where any of it pays off.
Right.
So people have to see where there's a payoff.
Right. And I think in more terms of, especially in terms of education, because remember, I started college when things were still really good. Things got bad when I was in college. And this is when I started my career, everything sucked. But the thing about it is when I started college, you didn't go to college because you wanted to have the better job. You went to college because you needed to get educated, just in general for your life. I didn't go to college because I was looking to get the career and make a ton of money. I was going to college because you just go to get educated. That's what we did back in the 90s, the early 2000s. Now it's like the whole focus is, well, if I'm going to go to college, it costs so much, I better get a big payout. It's like, no, you should just go to college for the sake of going to college. That's kind of the point. That's how it is everywhere else in the world. So, anyway, I just wanted to kind of point with that. But it does go back to this other issue, too, of this all leads into the bigger sort of issue with the government and with the economics of the society and people's personal finance, which is we just went through the pandemic. We're coming out of the pandemic, and it's a recovery period. This is not a rapid, things are growing, things are good, the economy's good, but this is not like a big growth period where things are ultra pristine, unless you're rich already, which is what their perspective was. So we were talking about that, the economy's doing well, but people don't see it that way necessarily. A lot of people still think, what was it? We looked at that last time, like 49% of Americans think we're in a recession, and we're not. we're actually in a really good economy right now. But this is part of the reason why, and I found this was a good article from Yahoo Finance. So data reveals rising economic distress across America despite post-pandemic growth. And so they showed just distressed areas on these maps. So let's see if we can get to scrolling here. Oh, here we go. Oh no. What's going on with this? All right. So striking disconnect remains in the U.S. economy, continued growth and softening inflation. Oh, Jesus Christ, what's going on there? Uh-oh, we lost it. Here we go.
It's gonna look like one of my favorite emojis.
Yeah. I don't know. This website's being weird. I think it's just too much data on this article. Here we go. So, the striking disconnect remains in the U.S. economy. Continued growth and softening inflation, along with Americans' pervasive pessimism and uncertainty about the future. I think people are just uncertain, Biden said, and that's why we've got to be steady, stay the course, and continue to produce these incredible jobs. So, it's a good thing he's pointing out and he's making jobs. Let's see. I'm going to have to cut some of this because this is ridiculous. Yeah, I'll come back and I'll cut this. Let me try to recycle this page. All right. Here we go. We'll come back in 3, 2, 1. All right. So, okay, insight into the disconnect arises from a deeper look into the lifeblood of the U.S. economy. The states, cities, and towns that make it run, data from the Economic Innovation Group, Distressed Communities Index showed that as of 2023, local economies across America still hadn't fully recovered from the effects of COVID-19. Now, we kind of discussed that last time, and there's a historical trend with pandemics where people in populated areas like urban centers tend to leave and go to more rural and suburban areas. And when that happens, they kind of take over jobs there, and it changes the economies. And then the cities have lost all these people. Right. This happened in the pandemic. It was the 1917 or 18 pandemic. I think it was 18 pandemic. That's what happened. People left the cities. Because why? Because you don't want to be around a lot of people when there's a pandemic. Because you're more likely to get the pandemic and die. Right. It's the same thing happened during the Black Plague. In Europe. I mean, that's where the last names became a common thing. It wasn't a thing before because you grew up in a town, there might be 500 people in the town or 1,000 people. So if you knew a guy named Bill, that was Bill. And if there were 3 or 4 Bills, yeah, Bill, his mother is this, or Bill, his father is that, right? But then when people started moving around, it's like, okay, now we've got towns and you've got 500, 1,000 people, and it's like, it's the Bill from out of town. It's like, well, which Bill are we talking about? Bill, the blacksmith. And that's where you get the name, Bill Smith. Bill the millwright. Bill Wright? Yeah. That's where a lot of last names came from. Bill from Oxford. Bill Oxford? Yeah. But that's what happens. People move around and it changes the economic layout and how things function. But that's just an example of that. So according to EIG, which uses U.S. Census Bureau data to sort districts by economic well-being, roughly 52 million Americans live in a distressed zip code. So that's big. That's 1 out of 6 Americans. That's up from 50 million in 2018. So that's still a big jump. I mean, that's that's less than 1%, but it's still pretty close. Distress scores are calculated based on the weighted factors. These factors include number of residents with high school diploma, the poverty rate, the number of adults not working, housing vacancy rate, median income ratio, changes in employment, and changes in the number of business establishments. EIG's discovered that in recent years, urban areas across the country have become increasingly distressed. Like I said, because people left. While the surrounding suburbs are considered more prosperous. Because they're expensive. So the pandemic has exacerbated this trend. The health of a region's economy is generally correlated with the size of its population. The pandemic saw major population changes across the country. Large urban counties, which EIG previously defined as intersecting with an urban area with a population of 250,000 or higher, have experienced major losses. Between July 2020 and July 1st, 2021, these counties saw an aggregate decrease of 812,000 residents. Almost 1 million people left the cities. According to the same report, exurban and suburban counties continue to grow the fastest because they went to less populated areas, adding 931,000 people. So part of this has happened is you've had this huge economic shift post-pandemic, and it's changed the landscape of the economy. And that's why people are trying to revamp and start over, and it's going to take a long time to recover. It's not going to happen within a couple of years. It's going to be 5 or 10 years to see a real recovery. And even then, things are not going to be the same as they were when you have these kinds of shifts. I don't know if you had anything to add to that. I mean, we've seen it 3 or 4 times in our adult lifetimes.
Lucky us, lucky us.
I know. Yeah, I know. That was kind of the point earlier.
I was like, I feel like we just like circled back here.
That's kind of what it is. But part of it is...
Born at the wrong time, man. Born at the wrong time.
Well, but the part of it is we keep circling back to these same mistakes. And that was kind of the joke on the previous clip is, well, we just need to tax the rich less, tax the rich less, tax the rich less. And then what ends up happening is, well, we have this huge wealth inequality problem. Well, but we overtax the rich. It's like, well, wait a second. That's not the fucking, minimum wage hasn't gone up. Why hasn't minimum wage gone up? Who decides minimum wage? Could it be, I don't know, the fucking federal government? And where are those guys getting all their donations from? Companies and wealthy donors. And what do they not want? The minimum wage to go up. So what if we taxed those wealthy donors and limited what they could give politicians? Maybe the politicians would be more apt to listen to their constituents and get more money for their constituents, and less apt to want to suck up to the guys giving them the money. That's the trickle-down effect. They pay less taxes so they can bribe more politicians with campaign donations, so those politicians can vote to give them less taxes and take more money from us. It's socialism for the rich, capitalism for the rest of us. And what happens is you keep running into well, if that's the case, why do we keep having all these recessions? Because that's what happens. Is they get richer and richer and richer, they fuck everything up, and who gets hurt the worst? The poor people. And then what happens is the government has to come in and bail them out. They did that in 2002. They did that during the 2008 recession. During the pandemic, the Treasury dumped $1 million into Wall Street to keep the stock market from crashing. $1 trillion they dumped in. And then we got screwed.
With the taxes on the rich thing, it's, if you want to boil it down to an even easier personal finance idea, it would be like if you and I cohabitated, and say we have a $2,000 property that we're living in, right, per month,
Right.
and we're splitting it 50-50. I pay $1,000, you pay $1,000.
Right.
Well, I make $100,000 a year, and you make $30,000 a year.
Right.
This is totally fair, right?
No.
Duncan's getting a great deal, right? And furthermore, not only is it fair, because some people might argue and say, well, you know what? It's not Lacey's fault that Duncan doesn't make as much money as her. Well, I guess that's true. But then it would be like exacerbating that issue and saying, well, Duncan should be getting richer because since Lacey has more free income, clearly that's somehow going to magically make it to him.
Right. Right.
How? How is that supposed to make it to him? Am I just like, well, now that I've got all this extra money, let me just start throwing it at him, Like, I'm actually not doing that. I'm putting more money in my retirement.
Right.
I'm putting more money in my savings account. I'm buying stocks for me. It's like really very little of it's going to ever make it to him, if any, right?
Right.
So it sounds absurd when I boil it down to something like us splitting the housing expense on a property or something. It sounds like a completely bonkers sort of statement, but that's what we're pretending will work with the tax situation. It's not different.
No.
Taxes just sound mysterious to people, but it's not different than what I just described. It's the same thing.
It's similar. And yeah, and the other thing about it too is what really exacerbates it is the distribution of power. Because now I'm broke and struggling all the time, and Lacey has all the money in that scenario, but let's say Lacey inherited that money, and then her kids are going to inherit that money and whatnot, and my kids are going to be in the same boat that I'm in. They're going to have to deal with that. But Lacey, while she's inheriting this money, she's got it in with the landlord, and she's giving the landlord a little extra money to say, Oh yeah, and let's make Duncan's portion of the house smaller. Let's give Duncan less access to these things. Even though he's paying half. We're going to change the rules. Or I want the better parking space. Right. That's what's happening.
I get the ensuite and you get the crappy little side bedroom.
Right. That's my point. That's because you have the money and you have leverage. And you have leverage over me. Because you have that power. And that's the problem when you have all these rich people like that. The problem he's not addressing in the earlier thing when he's talking about the top 10%, the problem isn't that there's a top 10%. Right? The problem is they control all the money. And there's a huge distribution gap between the top 10% and the bottom 50. I mean, if it were, okay, a wage gap like, or a wealth gap like, okay, the richest person in America had $100 million and the poorest person in America had $50,000 in the bank. That wouldn't be such a big deal. But we're dealing with a situation where the poorest people have less than $100 and the richest people have billions. That's a huge disparity. Who do you think has all the leverage? That's the thing they're missing out. And I think that's the problem. And I think when we talk about, yeah, the economy is really good, but why isn't that everybody's not on board and people think we're in a recession? Because from their perspective, they are kind of in a recession. And they're perpetually in a recession until something drastic changes. And it's going to happen from government regulation or government change. Or it's going to...
The economy itself may not have had negative growth for more than 2 quarters, but they themselves have had negative growth for way more than 2 quarters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's their own personal recession if you want to, boil it down that way.
Yeah. 50 million Americans. 1 out of 6. That's a lot of fucking people. It's a big chunk of the country. So that's the deal, right? Biden's making some progress, but once again, I still think he's stuck in the fucking previous century. I mean, he's old. It's the same thing with Trump. Trump is still stuck in the 90s, in the 80s. They're not representative. They're from the greatest they're older than the boomers. I don't even want the boomers to be in charge because they're the ones who caused a lot of this problem. Not to say that the greatest generation, really they were the ones that fucked it up. They let the boomers do whatever they wanted, and this is what happened. So, anyway, but yeah, I think that's what, if you're curious about that and why it's happening. So, from a personal finance perspective, if you're thinking about your position, right? Yeah, you can read all these books or watch Dave Ramsey or follow Scott Galloway or whoever the fuck you want on YouTube or buy Bitcoin or whatever it is. I think the smarter move is to sit there and go, okay, I'm kind of screwed in my position. What are outside thinking boxes, right? What are other things I can do? If I can't get a good education here, maybe I have to go somewhere else. Maybe I go to Canada. Maybe I go to Europe, right? Provided you can get the money to make the move. Can we look for other alternatives where it's like, well, I want to improve my situation? Well, then I need to be more active and vote for more opportunity. And vote for my ability and my children's ability to not be buried under medical debt or student loans. It's technically, we're talking about systemic change over time. You can't think about it anymore like, well, in my lifetime, I'm just going to work real hard and be rich, because it's not going to happen. It rarely happens. For every success story you hear, there are thousands of people who just never got lucky. And the ones who did get it, they didn't do it because they were smart or hard work. They did it mostly because of luck. They might be smart and hardworking too, but it's mostly luck. But to give you a sense of kind of how this is really affecting how things are going to go forward and what it's really going to mean for the rest of us, back in the 1970s, and this is funny, you might find this interesting. Xerox, the company that used to do printers, right? I think they're still around, right? Xerox, came up with a really interesting idea for their executives for a tax dodge. And they called it, basically it was a defined contribution, or defined benefit plan, right? Or contribution plan, sorry. So the idea is, me, executive at Xerox, I could put money into this account and it would be tax deferred. So I could put it in this account, invest it. It would be tax deferred. I wouldn't pay taxes until I pulled the money out. Right? And I could put more and more money in there and save it for when I'm older, or I could use it as an inheritance or whatever. This got passed, and you guys all know it as a 401k plan. But what happened when it got passed was it couldn't just be for executives. They set up rules where it had to be for all the employees. And it was a supplement to retirement. And they thought, oh, that's not bad. Because back in the 70s, the standard retirement plan, you had Social Security, you had a pension. Almost everybody who had worked for a company had a pension. And then you'd have whatever your savings was. So now you had three things. So you'd have Social Security, which pays out for life, your pension, which pays out for your life, and then you'd have some savings. So you should be fine. You'd be getting a check, two checks every month in retirement, and you'd be getting whatever you can do with your savings. Right? Well, what happened was pensions are expensive, and companies had to keep them funded. And in the 80s, it made them targets for takeovers, because if I have to have all this cash on hand for my pension, it makes me more attractive to be bought out by larger companies who will then take the cash and cancel out the pension. So a lot of these companies paid out or canceled out their pensions. So there weren't any more pensions. And Gen X, starting in the 90s, was the first generation to start out with no pensions for the most part. A lot of the boomers got them still, but almost none of the Gen Xers did. So all the Gen Xers are just relying on Social Security, and could they save enough from their 401ks? And remember what we said earlier, there have been 4 recessions, massive recessions, in the last 20 years, 25 years. So what do you think the market did for their 401ks? So this is an interesting article. So Gen X is the 401k experiment generation. Here's how that's playing out. Gen X has been the alpha tester for the 401k retirement system, and the gloomy results are rolling in. Who could have seen that coming? Nearly half of Gen Xers say their retirement savings are behind schedule, according to the newly released Goldman Sachs retirement survey. Many Gen Xers got a late start transitioning to 401k plans and struggled to catch up. Senior retirement strategist with Goldman Sachs Assets Management told Yahoo Finance, even now, half haven't calculated how much total retirement savings they'll need, how to save and invest and achieve that goal, or when they can afford to retire. That's significant, as the oldest in this cohort will turn 60 next year. In many ways, Gen X, those born between 65 and 80, has led our nation's experiment in this shift away from a pension system to a 401k system, requiring individuals to save and prepare for their own retirement. This is the first generation to rely primarily on their own individual savings through 401k-like plans, and therefore we refer to them as the 401k experiment generation. So, just so you guys know the difference, there used to be defined benefit plans, which is what a pension is, where they take some money out of your paycheck every month, right? So Lacey and I work for the same company, and they take some money out of our paychecks and they put it in a big pool. And then when we retired, based on how much we made, right, and how much we put in, we'd get a check every month until we died when we retired, right? This was a great way to keep employees, too, because nobody wanted to fucking dump their pensions, right? You wouldn't, I mean, if you had a pretty sizable pension, you'd stay with that company until you could get it. So that's how it used to work, but at least we get a check every month until we died, based on that. Now, a 401k is a defined contribution plan. So they take the money out of our check, and it goes into the 401k, and it's invested, and then when we retire, we get our 401k, and then we have to figure out how to spend that money. But then when that money's gone, it's gone. There's no security. As with the pension, I was going to get a check until I died. With a 401k, it's just what's there. And if I don't manage it correctly, or the market crashes, or whatever, it's all on me. And that's what's happened to them, and they don't have enough in there. And especially now, because we've talked about this before, less than half of companies offer a 401k anymore. So a lot of millennials and don't even have that. all they're going to have is Social Security unless they start saving. And even then, a lot of them don't know how to do that because they'd have to do it on their own. You know, but you can go sign up, you know, wherever you want to go, Charles Schwab, E-Trade, wherever. Get a 401k or an IRA and start saving and investing. But yeah, doesn't hurt to do that, kids. But yeah, we're going to see. You're going to have a lot of Gen Xers who are going to be really poor in their older years. And that's going to be a huge financial burden on the millennials and Generation Alpha. Because we can't, I mean, we're not going to let them all just be homeless on the street and barely living off whatever little bit of Social Security they're getting, a couple grand a month, maybe. Because you're going to have a huge poverty problem with the elderly.
Right.
And are they going to
be a couple grand? A couple grand a month. That's kind of a high estimate.
Yeah, and even then, that means most of them are going to be on food stamps, Medicaid, all that. It's going to strain the safety net system, unless we make it more robust, which means higher taxes. This is what happened when let's just lower taxes on the rich. No, we need to start thinking about what we're going to do for all these huge populations going forward. You know, it's the key.
Average.
Go ahead.
The average Social Security benefit is a little over $1,700.
That's the average, yeah.
Yeah, that's the average right now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of my clients are middle class, so they're getting close to the max, right? They're getting close to $3,000, but yeah.
But that's not the average.
That's above average.
Max.
Yeah, but you have to have a little bit of money.
I've had a lot of clients that are getting less. Yeah. I've had a lot of clients that are getting less. I've seen a lot of checks that are, around like $1,300,
right,
which is not nothing. If you had a pension right next to it,
right,
and you're saving right next to it, right, that would all kind of match together in a pretty tidy little way for you. But if that's the bulk of it, a $1,300 check.
Yeah, if you were getting
rough.
$1,300 plus you were getting $2,500 or $3,000 a month from a pension, plus you had $150,000 or $200,000 in savings, you'd be fine. Because you'd be getting the $3 or $4,000 every month. You'd be fine, right? Wouldn't be living in luxury or anything, but you'd be okay. Now it's like, well, maybe all they're getting is $15,000 a year. You can't even afford an apartment on that, let alone to eat. And then they're going to be old. They're going to have medical expenses and all that. You know? It's one of those things where you got to think about these things long term, individually, but at the same time, we need to think about these things collectively. Because what happens is you get these mass populations that are screwed, and then the rest of us end up having to bite the bullet. And who ends up biting the bullet? The middle class and the poor. Not the rich. The rich are going to be fine. They're living in a socialist economy. We're living in a capitalist economy where we all have to fight each other. That's the problem. Yep. Socialism for me, not for thee, kind of thing. But yeah. So we'll see what happens. We could have told you that years ago. I mean, we've been talking about this for 20 years in the finance industry. That it used to be the three legs of the stool: Social Security, pension, savings. Now it's just Social Security and savings, and for the millennials, it might just be Social Security, because we haven't had the ability to save because we've gotten paid less. And a lot of companies don't offer us 401ks anymore. So it's all on you. And we'll see what happens with that. Might turn into France, where they start killing all the rich people and taking their shit. I mean, it could happen. It could happen. So let's move on. Let's get to some news. So let's do this. Trump recently was convicted on 34 counts, and I would like to state that Lacey and I take no pleasure in that. So, with this lack of pleasure, I'm going to throw a little cold water. Trump did raise quite a bit of money right after he was convicted. He raised like $54 million, and he did it. He had a really good month in May while he was on trial. Not that that's surprising. I mean, of course, his supporters ran in, but there's some other things going on here. But I want to watch this real quick, just to go into. I think this is Wolf Blitzer talking about it. Here he is.
Tonight, Donald Trump and his allies are working on multiple fronts to capitalize on his historic criminal conviction. The Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee raking in a reported $141 million in May as the trial played out and culminated with those 34 guilty verdicts against the presumptive Republican presidential nominee.
So he raised a ton of money. Now, granted, Biden still got way more money. And I think other than April, Biden's beaten him in fundraising every month. So that's going on. But where is the money coming from, I think, is the interesting thing. Because it's not surprising. He got convicted. Of course, his followers were going to dump in. But, man, that was a lot of money, right? I'm like, I don't think his followers have that much money left that they can be dumping in like that, you know? Because a lot of them are lower middle class, right? You know, the non-educated white guy. So I wanted to get into this because here's kind of what's going on. So he had $53 million right after the guilty verdict. Was his big haul. Cash has been one of President Biden's advantages so far. 24 of the post-conviction money will help Mr. Trump close the gap. His campaign announced Friday evening that they'd raised nearly $53 million in 24 hours after his felony conviction. Now they claim that it might not be that much, but we'll see. He's lied before about money he's raised, but we'll see. But I'll take them at their word right now. It's hard to put the enormity of that sum in proper perspective, but it'd be nearly as much in a single day. The $58 million that Mr. Trump's main fundraising arm raised online in the last 6 months. So they did more, almost as much in the one day they did in the last 6 months, and that just on the, on the fundraising arm. The campaign first said on Friday morning it had collected nearly $35 million in the hours after the verdict. By Friday evening, the campaign raised $52.8. Blah blah blah. So Biden did really well. Biden's actually, I think, still up quite a bit. Cash has so far been one of Mr. Biden's advantages in this race. His main campaign committee entered May with $84 million compared to Trump's $49. Plus, Biden's got another $200 million that is spread out between the DNC for other campaigns and races because he wants to take the House and the Senate. So, and you got to factor in too that the bulk of the money Trump's raising is going to pay his attorney fees, which are close to $10 million a month right now. So $53 million that covers him for the next 5 months in attorney costs, let alone all their other costs. So the thing I wanted to get to is where he's getting it, because this was interesting, because it was a few weeks ago he had a bunch of billionaires over at oil company tycoon kind of guys, right, at Mar-a-Lago, and he said, hey, give me $1 billion and I'll pass whatever you guys want. Basically, buy legislation from me. I'll sell it to you if you give me $1 billion and solve all my problems. And none of them took the bait, but just because they didn't doesn't mean others didn't or others aren't. Just probably not to the tune of a billion. Billionaires in Silicon Valley are opening up to Trump. Now, not just Silicon Valley, other billionaires too, because now they realize after that meeting in Mar-a-Lago, it's pay to play, so they can get what they want if they just throw money at him. So you have now you have a potential leader of the United States who's completely transactional. So if you have the money, he'll do whatever you want him to do if you give him the money. So fuck the people. It's whatever the rich and the greedy want to do. So
it's only certain people. Only certain people will count.
So Donald Trump is set for a major stop in the 2024 money race on Thursday when he travels to Silicon Valley for a high-profile fundraiser co-hosted by investor David O. Sachs and venture capitalist Chamath Palihapitiya. This is one of the latest indicators of the ex-president's success in traditional deep blue Silicon Valley. San Francisco Bay Area is shifting towards Trump. Well, no, the voters aren't, just the few billionaires. But experts who have studied the role in billionaires in politics over recent decades said it shouldn't be a shock. So this goes back to The View, where the whole well, we need to reduce taxes on the rich, and everybody there's like, yeah. That's because they're all fucking millionaires. Of course they're all into that. That sounds good. That sounds good. And you're justifying it so I don't feel guilty? Great. Same thing here. So the Silicon Valley, in this case, has been pivoting for a while. Noted Northwestern University political scientist Jason Seward in a recent interview, it isn't just unusual for a group of people who've become affluent to align towards the party that defends wealth. Of course not, added Seward, who co-authored a book on billionaires and politics. The tech industry pivot is a part of a larger embrace of Trump by billionaires and CEOs that has fallen into some familiar historical patterns. Billionaires this go-around, like their predecessors in years past, seem to prioritize economic concerns as well as access to power. That's what it is. That's the top reason for their support. But other historical patterns have been broken. This current class of vocal billionaires led by Musk is much more likely than their predecessors, experts say, to focus on social issues. And we can talk about that some other time. I want to talk about the financial aspect. The way I see it is this, and this is just reality, and this is part of the problem of a two-party system. If I'm a billionaire right now, and we talked about this months ago with Davos, and they were really concerned, and Europe's really concerned, and Asia's really concerned. If Trump becomes president, you're talking about deregulations, you're talking about them probably not backing Ukraine anymore, so war is going to be inevitable in Europe. And things are going to escalate, and potentially Europe could be at war with Russia. And then the question is with Trump as president, can we get the U.S. to back him? Or is he going to try to back out? Then he could back out of the whole issue in Israel. At least Biden's sort of doing something now. But he's sort of doing something. But Trump's just going to let them go ramshat. So Israelis are just going to go ahead and do mass genocide on the Palestinians, which is going to piss off the Syrians and the Egyptians and the Iranians, so there could be war in the Middle East. That'll interrupt commerce and business. Plus, Trump wants to raise tariffs again, which is going to jack up inflation in the U.S., which means less purchasing. So you'll see a slow growth and a recession and mass war. That's what they're concerned about, right? So that's what the wealthy are concerned about, that their bottom line is going to be screwed if he gets reelected. But you're a billionaire. You got to think, right? What do I do? Right? Kind of hoping Biden wins, but if Trump wins, what do I do? Well, I give money to Trump because I want to be on his good side. Because I want to be able to get some of the things I want. It's a hedge. Same way you do with stocks. I put all this money in one stock, but if it tanks, I'm screwed. So I'm going to put some money in another stock that's going to do the opposite, so I can offset my losses. That's all they're doing. And a lot of some of them I think really support him and like him. And a lot of them from the aspect of, well, if Biden becomes president, nothing's really going to happen to me. But if Trump becomes president, I could be fucked. So I need to buy him off now. So the few million I spend now could save me hundreds of million later. But that's the danger of having a guy like that in the White House. You know? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Really, it's just, selling policy to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, in which case...
Buy your safety.
Yeah, it's aristocratic thinking. It's not democratic at all. Because we're not representing the people anymore who elected you. I'm just representing the guys who are giving me money. Which is part of the problem with our system.
Right.
Which is funny because if you read Das Kapital, Karl Marx predicted this was the problem with capitalism. He's not wrong. He's actually been right about a lot of shit. But that's what he's going to do. So Trump's going to kiss these guys' ass, and these guys are going to sit there and go, well, might as well give him something now so we can curry favor later. And if he does win, then we at least have some leverage. And some of them are probably stupid enough to think they do, but it's once again, it gets to the point of the king gets all the bribes and takes all this shit so he can do more for the lords, and the peasants get screwed until what happens? The peasants finally things get so bad the peasants just fucking revolt. We've seen this over and over again in history. It's getting boring. But it's how it happens. And that's what they're doing now, and they don't see it. eventually things are going to get so bad. It's always a class struggle in this fucking planet. Our stupid species, man. But, I mean, you can go through history, it's always a class struggle. The rich suppress the poor until the poor fucking revolt. But meanwhile, I don't think Trump's going to win anyway, so I'm not ultra concerned about if he wins. But that's where he's getting his money. I just wanted to point that out. Now, the whole thing is now that he's a convicted felon, he's kind of screwed. Even before, I didn't think he was going to win. Because you got to remember, Biden beat him by almost 9 million votes in 2020. And since 2018, during that midterm race, Trump and the Republicans haven't done well in any election since then in the last 6 years. They've gotten smoked in every election. Right? So things are not a good trend going. So Trump has to make up all those votes. He's got to get all of his base and the independents, and he's got to make up, millions of votes. Now, granted, this is still going to come down to probably 500,000 votes in 4 or 5 states, but he's got to make up a lot of ground. And now that he's a convicted felon, what do you think Biden and everybody else is going to be saying all through the election? Convicted felon Trump, adjudicated rapist Trump, 2-time impeached Trump.
Well, I mean, here's a fun question. Is he going to be able to cast a vote for himself?
Yeah, technically in Florida he can. Because the way they work it in Florida is if you're a felon, you can't vote, but you can get an exception if you're a felon in a different state. So they're going to give him the exception to vote. But here's the thing, is there's a lot of countries that if you're a felon in the United States or another country, you can't go to those countries. So like Canada, a lot of countries in Europe, they're going to have to waive that because he's a felon. He's not allowed in their country. They're going to have to find some exception to their laws. If Trump goes there. But anyway, so the problem is now how does the right-wing machine justify all this shit? Well, Fox News lost their collective minds. Trying to spin this in a positive way.
Hold on. My second favorite emoji.
You need 2 hands for this one. It's gonna get good. So I got this couple little clips from the Majority Report, but they're trying to spin it as, well, this is horrible and it's wrong and it's unfair and we need to go to war with the Democrats or some shit. But it's just craziness, and we're gonna watch a couple clips on this.
You could even say Alvin Bragg only brought this because he has Democratic leanings and his constituency wanted this, but you can't, both sides had the ability to pick the jury. The thing that you cannot deny is that there aren't other cases happening. For example, look at this.
What about the evidence itself, Teresa? Do you think it was fair? Do you think the fact that they took these misdemeanors, these dead misdemeanors, and they electrified them back to life and then strapped them to 3 separate felonies without actually indicting him on those felonies?
Pause it first.
I gotta say, that's such bullshit. Because they keep doing that on Fox. There was no real crime. There was no crime. Okay, I want to get this clear for this. Okay, Biden was involved and this was all manipulated bullshit. Bullshit. It's a state case. Biden can't even pardon him. The only person who can pardon him is the governor of New York, who's definitely not going to do that. Right? On top of that fact, this is handled in the county, in Manhattan, in that county. And the DA there gets to decide whether or not to bring the case. But if he decides to bring the case, what does he have to do? First, he has to build the case, then he has to go to what's called a grand jury. And I think in New York, the grand juries are 12 people. So he gets to go to the grand jury, present the case, his evidence to them, to say, hey, can I even indict this guy? To try him. The grand jury doesn't decide guilt or innocence, just whether or not the case can go forward. So he's got to convince 12 people, and he did. 12 of Trump's peers, 12 ordinary citizens, just like Trump, said, yeah, you can indict him. So then they indicted him. But Trump's got a right to trial, and he's got a right to a jury trial, and he got a jury trial. And the jury was selected from 12 ordinary citizens, and Trump's lawyers and the prosecution got to decide who these people were and argue about it. The lawyers got to pick him. So he got some say in who the jury was. And they got the jury, and those 12 people said, yeah, convict him on all 34 counts. All 12 of them said that. And that's the only way you can get convicted. All that has to happen first. That's why DAs rarely bring charges unless they're going to get a conviction. That's why I was convinced he was going to get nailed. But that's why, I mean, so what she's saying, this whole, oh, well, it was a misdemeanor it was a dead misdemeanor. No, it was a real crime. He falsified business records to cover up a campaign fraud. Now, the campaign fraud they didn't try, because that probably is a federal crime and all that. It doesn't really matter. What matters is he covered up the business records to do it. So, if Lacey pays me $1 million to go kill somebody, whether I killed him or not is irrelevant. Lacey paid me the $1 million, right? So we're in conspiracy together. And then Lacey hides the fact that she paid me $1 million by saying, oh, I just hired Duncan as my financial planner. This is exactly what happened to Cohen and Lacey B. Trump in this scenario. The crime is she tried to cover it up. The crime. That's the crime. That's what makes it a felony. And this one is so common. They were talking about since 2015 or 16, the last 10 years. The Manhattan has already convicted over 9,000 people of this same crime. In 10 years. This is a really common instance where people try to falsify their records to cover up illegal shit. Because heaven forbid, right? So she's just full of shit right there. I mean, or not her, the main guy. It just kills me. Because...
So, I just want to throw this out there. You know how you teach little kids that they'll get into less trouble if they can just own up to what they did.
Right.
Kind of feel like they might have skipped that lesson on him.
Well, yeah. Trump is an example of what happens when your parents give you money instead of love. It's true. His father fucking hated him. Let's jump back in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is a fair trial, and if the whole double standard is what's getting me so mad, it's just they're pounding on him and they're beating him down and cutting him down, and I don't understand why Hunter Biden gets away with these things, Hillary Clinton. It just gets me so angry.
Okay. I'm going to actually let Sam cover this. I think he does cover this.
I'm so excited to go vote for him in November.
Okay, you'll notice that was at 12:40 p.m. In Pacific time, so 3:40 p.m. Eastern time, and exactly at that moment, one of 12 jurors was being seated in the Hunter Biden felonious trial, and don't take my word for it. Take Fox News' word for it later that night, that the only reason why, or I should say later that afternoon, the only reason why Hunter Biden was on trial was because of his last name. Here is Trey Gowdy and his haircut. Explain.
His new haircut. He's got the grease back.
It's a work in progress.
Days. It's always a work in progress with him.
Your thoughts about the difference between Trump trying to get a fair trial in New York City and Biden's trying to get a fair trial in Delaware?
Well, Dana, I have this really bad habit, although I'm working on it. I try to be fair. I know there's a very small constituency for that. I think if it had been Donald Jones or Donald Trump or Donald Thomas, we would not have been in New York for the past several weeks. I think if this were Hunter Jones or Hunter Smith, you and I would be talking about something else this morning. So we got to get beyond treating people differently based on their political status or what their last name is. I did gun prosecutions for 6 years. I went after convicted felons. I went after people who were fugitives from justice. I went after lots of different people who are prohibited from possessing a firearm. But I'll bet you there weren't 10 cases prosecuted nationwide of addicts or unlawful drug users who possess firearms or allowed on.
And that's where I want to hit that point. So while they're bitching on Fox News about this is unfair, why aren't they going after Biden's son? Well, while she's saying that Biden's son is in trial for unlawfully possessing a weapon and the jury was being seated while she said that, she was saying, oh, well, how come we're not prosecuting Biden's son? He's being prosecuted as you're talking. You freaking idiot. Man. So stupid. That's what they're doing on Fox. Now, meanwhile, here's the difference. And this is where Trey Gowdy, who just the weird guy with the hair, was just talking. Here's where he's full of shit.
I'm so sorry. I was so distracted by thinking he kind of looked like a cone head.
He's
I was like,
the little nose and everything.
And like these, like the sort of kind of weird robot guys that were on the old Coca-Cola commercials. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. He's built for aerodynamics, Lacey.
I mean, you know what? That might be some sort of modification that we all go through.
You could chuck him like a spear and he'll just keep flying. Anyway, so Trey Gowdy, sorry to make fun of how he looks, but here's where he's full of shit on the comparison. Now, it is true that part of this is being brought against Hunter Biden because he's the president's son. And I'm sorry, as a kid who played on a team that a baseball team his father coached in Little League, you get more shit when your father's the coach. When your dad's president, you get more scrutiny. It sucks. It's not fair, but that's how it goes. Now, the gun charge, what it was is he bought a gun, and on the form he filled out that he wasn't a drug addict while he was a drug addict. And he was on drugs, right? So he lied on the form, and then 11 days later he returned the gun. When he thought better of it. Right, or sobered up, or whatever it was. So he didn't commit the crime. Right? But Gowdy's pointing out, I'll bet you there haven't been 10 of those tried in the United States in, God, forever. Nobody ever gets convicted of this. It's a rare that this ever goes to court. He gave the gun back. Usually they just ignore it and let it go. And part of that's because Republicans have pushed for lesser gun laws for decades. Right? And now they're all hot.
That's only if a Republican has the gun.
Right. If a Democrat has the gun, or the president's son that they don't like has the gun. Yeah, so that's what this is. So, yeah, I mean, Hunter Biden's probably going to end up doing some time for this. For basically lying on a form, and I want to get this straight. He lied on a form to acquire a gun, and he's probably going to do time. Trump lied 34 times to cover up a crime. And that's not a legit case. But the Hunter Biden one, the comparison is almost ridiculous. Now, if you're asking me, do I think it's fair or not fair? Honestly, I think Hunter Biden got screwed a little bit, but the bottom line is, he still committed the crime, man. He gets found guilty. He has to do whatever the punishment is. Their idea is, well, yeah, but if it's Trump, no, that's fine. I'm okay with it. Let him go. And Trump did it 34 times. I mean, that's the thing that's so fucked up. You can't. The comparison is such a fucked up thing, because in one case, he's making the point of, well, the Hunter Biden thing is so uncommon. It's stupid that he's being tried. That it's so uncommon we try anybody for it. It's usually a slap on the wrist. We just let him go. The Trump thing is so common that now over 9,000 people have been convicted of the same crime in New York in the last 10 years. So you can't sit there and go, well, it's the same. It's uncommon that he'd get convicted, but it's very common he'd get convicted. So it's the same. No, it's not. That's where He's trying to make this weird false comparison. It's similar in the sense they both lied on documents. Right? He did it to illegally acquire a gun. Trump did it to illegally influence the election. And the thing about it is nobody is sitting there going, well, we need to let Hunter Biden go. No, he's got a fair trial. The jury can decide. Same as Trump. It's how the fucking court system has worked in this country since the founding. They get jury trials, and that's how it goes. The jury can decide. Or they can plea out, whatever they want to do. So, I don't know. I mean, they're so trying hard to justify this. But they've got nothing. It's just so pathetic. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to throw on that, but...
No, I mean, I am with you. I mean, listen, if Hunter Biden did the crime, then he's got to go through the trial like everybody else. I do agree he's getting screwed a little because it's sort of like the let's make an example of him sort of thing kind of in play. Right. And I do kind of hate that. Although, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like,
well, my attitude is, look, you're the president's son. You're the president. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just how it goes. You're held to a higher standard, like, and that's unfortunate. But that's what it is.
If you're the teacher's kid, you can't skip class, and you got to turn in your homework.
Yeah,
you know,
no
like
shit. Yeah,
you're just sort of stuck with it. You know.
Yep. When your dad's the coach of the baseball team, you get yelled at the most. You're doing the most push-ups and the most laps. That's just how it goes. Because you have to set the example. So, anyways, that's how they're trying to justify it. And part of it is because they're really scared now because the polls post-trial have now come out in the last week. Did the conviction really affect the election? And here's Fox News talking about this. And it's not good.
Trump simply cannot beat President Joe Biden, relying solely on the votes of people who think his legal travails are a politically motivated scam.
MAGA Republicans have been trying to publicly spin Donald.
This is Pondering Politics. Let me skip ahead a little bit. Let me have him just introduce this.
But again, polls and a Fox News host beg to differ. We're going to start with this clip here in which Fox News host Shannon Bream has an exchange with Republican Senator Tim Scott on this very topic.
Shannon.
Okay, so let's talk about this. The Republican spin on this has been it's going to motivate your base, that angry voters are motivated voters, and they are angry about this verdict. But Politico adds this, saying Trump simply cannot beat President Joe Biden, relying solely on the votes of people who think his legal travails are a politically motivated scam. Trump's only path to victory is a coalition that includes many Republicans and independents who find him deplorable, but think a second Biden term would be even more so. So what is the plan from President Trump to reach out to people who may not love him at this point? Maybe some Nikki Haley voters, independents, others who are skeptics, other than the grievances. What about campaigning on policy and reaching out?
So that was kind of the
What about policy? What about what? I've got an idea. What if he actually talked about policy?
What? No, he doesn't have any policy. Policy is good. We're going to get revenge on everybody I don't like. That's the policy.
That's the platform.
That's been their platform for a while. I just think it's funny because she's pointing out the big issue here is, like we were saying before, he's got to make up ground from the last election. He did not. Biden smoked him. Biden beat him by a lot. And so he's got to make up ground, and now he's alienating Nikki Haley's voters. He's alienating big parts of the Republican Party. He's now convicted, so the uninformed voter group, they might not know anything else about him or Biden or anything else because they don't follow politics, but they're going to know he's a convicted felon, and that's definitely going to sway some votes. And that was the question: does it help him? Does it hurt him? Well, here it is. This is Brian Tyler Cohen, and he's going to jump in and tell us a little bit about this.
It apparently did not take long for Donald Trump to feel the electoral impacts of his guilty verdict in his New York criminal trial. There have now been a raft of post-conviction polls, and the results are devastating for him. So we're going to jump in, but let me caveat this really quickly. We're in a moment of calcified polarization. It is next to impossible to get any movement in polls, which is why these polls are especially telling. First off, the Reuters Ipsos poll. 3 weeks back, it was a dead heat 40-40. Now, Biden leads 41-39. In that poll, 10% of Republicans and 25% of independents say they're less likely to vote for Trump now. Even if half of that number revert back and ultimately go home to Trump, that is still a massive defection of voters away from Donald Trump, and could very well be the difference between a Trump win and a Trump loss. Another poll, Morning Consult. Last time, Trump was up 44-42. This time, Biden leads 45-44, a 3-point swing in Biden's favor. Worse, 15% of Republicans and 49% of independents said that Trump should end his campaign as the result of his conviction. Not exactly a ringing endorsement from his own base, nor the independents.
So, basically, he's got even more ground to make up now. Half of independents say he shouldn't even be running. 15%. He can't lose.
Yeah,
he can't lose 1% of the Republicans, and 15% are already gone.
Right.
I don't see. I mean, it's still early. It's still several months before the election. He could pull something out, but right now, I said this earlier. I don't see how he could do it before. Now, I definitely don't see how he can do it. I think he's going to lose. I think he's going to lose by a lot. I think it's going to be embarrassing. So
I hope he's got a good therapist, because I think those daddy issues are going to come out big time for him.
yeah, especially in prison. Oh man, he could talk to his prison psychologist. Daddy didn't love me. But anyway, let's I'm sorry, because just thinking about him in jail in a jumpsuit, just talking about his problems. So we'll see if he gets prison time. I think he's going to get prison time. I think the DA is going to ask for the minimum, which is over a year. But we'll see. But let's jump into some fun stuff for real quick. So it's been a while. We've ignored them, but we got to go to some of the crazier outskirts of the MAGA movement just for fun. So Marjorie Taylor Greene having a rough time lately. I don't know. Did you know that, Lacey? She's really having a hard time moving along. So first, when Trump had his trial, remember he invited a bunch of the Republicans, the Red Tie Brigade. They all came in dressed like him, and they were all yelling at the press outside the courthouse. Yeah, and so invited a bunch of like Matt Gaetz and all these other guys, and Mike Johnson, who's the Speaker of the House, who Marjorie Taylor Greene tried to get ousted. He got invited, but guess who didn't get invited? Marjorie Greene didn't get invited. And she was very upset by that. And it was a very tough moment for her. And furthermore, Trump just came out with his shortlist for the VP, for his vice presidential pick. And we're going to look at it real quick. Here it is. Trump's docs requests reveal VP shortlist. Here it is. J.D. Vance, who I said I think is going to be the guy. Doug Burnham, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, Ben Carson, Elise Stefanik, Byron Donalds, Tom Cotton. Guess who's not on that list? Marjorie Greene. Yeah, so she's having a rough week, and then, because she's the ultimate Trumper, she loves him so much. But she's such an embarrassment, right? He can't have her anywhere near him. But she kind of lost her collective shit.
Oh my God, I would be so excited for that pairing. Like, that would be such a train wreck that I would be like this, like, the whole time.
She's such a nutball. So, in all of her anger and frustration, she's on the COVID committee, and she's a COVID denier, which is weird. Half of them are COVID deniers on that committee. So they were going on, and you think, okay, normal COVID committee meeting, let's talk about what went right, what went wrong, how we can prevent it in the future, how we can get prepared so we don't have this sort of devastating response that we had where 1 million Americans died over a few years. That was traumatic, right? You'd think that's what it'd be about, but no. Marjorie Taylor Greene took it in a completely different direction when she was interviewing Anthony Fauci. Now, when she interviews people in Congress, and this is every time, she doesn't ask questions. She just yells at you for 5 minutes and then gets up and leaves. That's all she does. So we're going to get ready for some of that. And it's just fucking stupid.
Mr. Fauci, you were quoted on CBS Face the Nation saying it's easy to criticize, but they're really criticizing science because I represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci?
I am a scientist who uses the scientific method to gain information.
Yes, you said you represent science. Do you represent science, Mr. Fauci? Yes or
Again,
no? Yes or no?
No, that's not a yes or no
Yes,
answer.
it's a yes or no.
I don't think it is.
Okay, well, we'll take that as a you don't know what you represent.
Oh,
But
Lacey, you teach English, right? So if I say you ask me a financial question and people are criticizing me, I'm saying, well, that's just the facts. That's just what it is. I'm just representing finance. Does that mean I am the representative of finance or a representative of finance? Or does it just mean that in that moment I'm representing the findings of the financial community? How would you take that?
I mean, I would kind of go with the last one, but...
Okay. Yeah. Just saying. It's just one of those things. It's like
I am not representing the entire English language. However, in any given moment, I might be representing some rule of grammar or some thing in literature.
Some fact about
as
English.
Being fact, as maybe an expert in that area. Yes.
I like how stupid she is. He's a scientist. He doesn't represent science. He's not the czar
Well,
of
it's
science.
like, what's her point? What's her point?
She
Now
doesn't-
she's showing him dogs. Like,
Yeah, we're gonna see this. This is really fucking stupid. Yeah, no, she doesn't. Her point is she hates him and she thinks he's evil. That's it. That's her whole point.
this, as director of the NIH, you did sign off on these so-called scientific experiments. And as a dog lover, I want to tell you this is disgusting and evil, what you signed off on, and these experiments that happened to beagles paid for by the American...
There's another situation with dogs I'd love to hear her opinion on.
Right, because didn't Christy Nome kill her dog?
Right. So how's Christy Nome for you, Margie?
Yeah.
How is that?
No, so when she's...
Oh, no, those are the right kind of dogs to kill?
Right.
So Republicans murder dogs.
Right.
Right?
She's referring to some thing that he wasn't even involved in the study. I guess it was something going on when he was there, and they had dogs and they were bitten by insects, and they wanted to test the results of these insects biting the dog. But he wasn't involved. The photo she's showing here of the two beagles, I don't know what this experiment is, but I looked it up later. That's from Tunisia. So Fauci has nothing to do with that. That's another country doing that. So Fauci at the National Institute of Health at the NIH, he had nothing to do with it. So this is all bullshit. But she's trying to say, look, you torture animals. When the Republican way is we take them to the gravel pit and we shoot them.
I don't understand this lady. Like, how does she have enough time on her hands to, come up with this weird stuff?
Because she doesn't pass anything. She doesn't do it. She doesn't have any policies. She just gets up there and yells. She's just trying to get clips and TV shows. And look, we're falling into it. Yeah, because we're talking about it now and making fun of her. But she's just an embarrassment. But there is a small portion of people that support her that will give her money. She's one of the biggest fundraisers for the Republicans because of this stupid shit.
Georgia. I mean, listen, if you want to put in a Republican, fine. Do your thing, Georgia. Do your thing. But, come on. You could do a little better than this.
Well, and furthermore, absolutely, Georgia. And here's the other thing. Not Georgia's the state, but that county she's in she's actually in, the reddest county, one of the reddest counties in the country, if not the.
Well, sure, that's fine, but I feel like they can still do better.
Well, absolutely. But the thing about it, too, is if you ever wanted a poster child for anti-democracy, she's it. This is the democratically elected representative. I don't know. Maybe democracy's not really working, guys. She doesn't get it. She just cracks me up.
Taxpayer. And I want you to know Americans don't pay their taxes for animals to be tortured like this. So the type of
Especially not in
science that
Tunisia.
you are representing Mr. Fauci is abhorrent, and it needs to stop. Mr. Fauci, you also represent the type of science where you confess that you made up the COVID rules, including
I didn't hear what you
6
said.
feet social distancing and masking of children.
I never said I made anything up.
You admitted that you made it up. You
I
made it
didn't
up
say
as you
I
went.
made.
Okay, I want to get this because this is funny. So, that's the Daily Mail. First off, the Daily Mail is a freaking right-wing rag. You can't trust hardly anything in it. You try to verify it, and 90% of the time it's bullshit. Here's what he said in reality. With the 6 feet rule, they asked him, why is it 6 feet? He's like, it's kind of arbitrary. It could be 5, it could be 10. It's got to be at least 3 or 4, though. So we just said 6. We just sort of made up 6 just to make it something people could use as a guide, right? It's kind of like, why is this an inch? Why isn't this an inch? Because we just arbitrarily said that's an inch.
It's sort of like, why is there a guideline that your emergency savings should be, 6 months of
Right.
your expenses? Why isn't it 9 months or 11 months or 3 months, right? I mean,
it's arbitrary. We're just giving it. It's just sort of a rule of thumb, and that's what he was saying. And like the kids wearing masks, he's like, kind of a rule of thumb. It was like, well, do they really need to? Is it going to make a difference? Well, maybe, maybe not. Found out it actually did.
and at a certain point at the beginning of something, people are making up rules because it's a new thing. There weren't rules before because it wasn't a thing before.
Right. Yeah, so she's doing all this, and it's all fucking nuts. We'll skip ahead. I don't want to watch all this, but we'll skip to some... What's her next bit? She's such an idiot. Oh, here's a good one. We'll skip to this. But yeah, I mean, it's... Once again, she's just making shit up. Now, what does any of this have to do with... I mean, the dog thing, what does that have to do with COVID? God knows. Right? She's just trying to discredit this guy. But really, the question is, what's actually beneficial going forward? And the masks were, and the distancing was. So, anyway.
And why you got Fauci here in the first place for, anyway?
Because mainly the Republicans just wanted to attack him. Instead of, let's ask one of the foremost viral doctors, pandemic doctors in the world, hey, how could we have done this better in the future? What can we do to prevent this in the future, or at least respond better? That's what I'd be asking him.
Or right. I mean, you could ask that of Fauci. Like, okay, so if you could go back knowing what you know now, what would have been like some better pathways for us to take on this,
Instead, they just yelled at him to try and score points with their conspiracy voter base, their anti-COVID, anti-vaccine voter base. That's all it is. So we'll watch this clip real quick.
Objection. I reclaim my time. Mr. Raskin.
Gentlelady will suspend.
Mr. Chairman, of order. Just in terms of the rules of decorum, are we allowed to deny that a doctor is a doctor just because we don't want him to be a doctor?
Yes, because in my time, that man does not deserve to have a license. As a matter of fact, it should be revoked, and he belongs in
Gentlelady
prison.
will suspend. The gentlelady should recognize the doctor as a doctor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, is this what we have become? Is this what we have devolved into? No decorum.
You know what? We can do that hearing about the poor men that were injected with syphilis, because I support you in that. That's horrific. And this government that does things like that to Americans doesn't have decorum to the American people.
Mr. Chairman,
the gentleman is out of
point of regular order, please.
The gentleman is out of order.
I don't want to call him a doctor because I don't like him. Oh, man. You have anything on that? Are you there?
I'm done with them.
It's just all stupid shit. I mean, yeah, but it just goes on.
I feel like they just like to waste more time rather than get anything accomplished.
Right.
I feel like over and over, we're watching clips of them wasting time, being totally ineffective and getting nothing accomplished. Like, what are you dragging him in there for? Like, what is your purpose? You're supposed to get some things done for us, and it's just some weird rag session that doesn't feel like it's going anywhere that makes any sense. They are not a courtroom, but it kind of feels like they just want to drag people in there and try them, so to speak. But they're not a courtroom. They're supposed to be getting some things done.
Right. We're supposed to be getting answers and solutions to problems and presenting bills and ideas about how we can distribute our resources to better equip the country, to make the country better. Instead, what has she passed? What has she done since she's been in office? Fucking nothing.
She just likes to drag people in there and start railing at them and wasting a lot of time.
Yeah, but then it goes, this is why we cover
If her railing went somewhere, that was going to translate into something getting done, maybe it would be worthwhile, but it never does.
Yeah, but this is why we cover it, is because that's what it is. And she represents a big portion of the Republican Party. The MAGA wing, right? This is what their government looks like. Nothing gets done. We just yell at people and blame people. We never accomplish anything. We never pass anything. We never do anything. It's all just performance shit to try and raise money. It's just a big telethon. That's all it is. Anyway, Fauci got the chance to finally respond on the news, and this is on CNN with Caitlin Collins. Let's see if that'll come up.
And my source tonight is Dr. Anthony Fauci himself. And Dr. Fauci, it's great to have you on tonight. I mean, it was a remarkable day on Capitol Hill. And obviously, you're not a stranger to testifying before Congress or even pretty contentious hearings. But I just wonder how today compares to the other times that you've been up on Capitol Hill testifying before lawmakers.
Well, as you know, Caitlin, thank you for having me. I have testified literally hundreds of times over the last 40 years over Congress, and there's always been differences of opinion, differences of ideology, criticisms, and things like that. But the level of vitriol that we see now, just in the country in general, but actually played out during this hearing, was really quite unfortunate, because the purpose of hearings are to try and figure out how we can do better so that next time, if and when we are faced with a pandemic, we'd be better prepared and we could benefit. If mistakes were made, we identify them and we try to correct them for the future. That's not what we saw today, as shown by the clip you showed with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, that was nothing about trying to do better, unfortunately.
Yep. He's right. I mean, that's all it is. They're just bitching and moaning. And he's right. You've got all those people in that room. A lot of them are government employees. They're all getting paid. It's costing hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million, to run that hearing. And she blows a bunch of time just to yell at the guy because she thinks it'll help her out with, her voters, with the base. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's all she's got. Plus, I think she's still really hurt that she didn't make the VP list. This is her trying to get back some TV time after getting kicked in the balls. And then we could go. Do you want to do her on the Trump trial? Or do you want to do Boebert? And we'll wrap up.
Boebert.
All right. Boebert. So they had 3 debates in Colorado. So she was District 3. Now she's carpetbagging and moving to District 4 because it looked like she was going to lose in District 3. And Buckman left in District 4. And he left in March. Now, there's a special election coming up here at the end of June to fill his seat until the election in November. Right? She can't run in that election because she'd have to give up her current seat. So she can't run in that, but she's running in the primary. So the special election, they're going to elect somebody to fill in that seat, and then she's going to have to run in a primary against that person in November. Again, that she's going to have to run against them because they're automatically going to be an incumbent. And whoever the Democrat is. The Democrat probably won't win in District 4 in Colorado. It's a pretty red district. But that's what's going on. So she's kind of in a bad situation. Well, they had 3 debates. She went to the first 2. They did not go well. And she skipped the third one. But I want to play a clip from the second one because She just got smacked around, and it was really bad for her. Oh, plus, I want to notice her eyebrows. Her eyebrows were freaking me out the whole time.
Mr. Lynch, it is your turn to ask another candidate a question.
Well, Richard took all my thunder, but
Let me step back. Go ahead.
So I don't care what you say. All of this is public, Congresswoman. 0 bills passed, 24 votes missed, fewer comments, and I appreciate the fact that you have taken over my campaign slogan of delivering for Colorado. But can you tell me how you actually have delivered anything?
Yes.
For the state of Colorado.
Thank you.
That has been signed in and is actually actionable from what you've done.
I understand that Democrat congressional campaign campaigner Adam Frisch, you have his old campaign.
Okay. First off, the makeup. There's way too much makeup. The eyebrows are all painted on. I don't know what's going on with her. But you can see how she waffles right out of the gate. Well, Adam Frisch.
Right.
Well,
she's
you're
not saying anything.
Right. Well, you're not running against Adam.
Right.
You're not running against Adam Frisch. He's running in the 3rd district. You ran from the 3rd district to the 4th district where you are now because you were afraid of losing to Adam Frisch. Right? But that wasn't the question. The question is, what have you done? You've passed 0 bills in 4 years. You missed 20-something, 24 major votes. What are you doing? Right? And the point is nothing. So let's see where tap dance around this one. It's a good question.
Manager, and these are her talking points. I get that, but we're not at
These
0.
are facts.
We are not at 0 for legislation passed. I have passed my.
It's Googleable.
Let's let her answer the
I have
question.
passed my Pueblo Jobs Act that's been signed into law, but I've also passed over 80 other initiatives that have been signed into law. One single standalone bill is not the only way to get.
Okay. The Pueblo Jobs Act, she didn't write it. She was one of the co-sponsors of it. And when it finally got to it, she voted against it. But she's taking credit for it. That's why he put it out. You voted against that. What are you talking about?
Get something signed into law. And I have over 80 initiatives that have been signed into law, whether that be through the amendment process, the appropriations process, or through the congressionally directed spending. And I have brought back almost $100 million in infrastructure and water projects.
Okay, 2 things. Yeah, amendments and other stuff. You co-sponsored things. You didn't write them, you didn't push them, you just said, I'll sponsor it. It's like Lacey coming up to me and Duncan, how much legislation have you passed? Well, I signed 1,000 petitions last month. I didn't do anything. I just signed some shit.
Yeah.
And then she's talking about, I brought $100 million back. That was from the Infrastructure Act that Biden passed, the IRA Act. And there was a bunch of jobs bills and stuff that Biden's team and the Democrats passed. She voted against that. And then when Colorado got the money and the district got the money, she went out there and made a big show like she voted for it, even though she tried to kill that. So even though it created all these great jobs in her district, to District 3, and she tried to take credit for it, the fact is she voted against these people getting these jobs. She voted against people getting this money. So she's so full of shit. That's why this guy's making this face right here when she's talking about that. What the fuck? What are you talking about? Liar.
Projects to Colorado. Water storage in Rangeley, Colorado, $5 million there. I have advocated for the South Bridge in Glenwood Springs, Colorado for 3.5 years, and they were able to get a huge chunk of money, and the former mayor came to my office to thank me for my work in ensuring that that was done, and also the congressionally directed spending that went prior to that.
We got another minute of something you wanted to answer, and Mr. Lynch gave you the opportunity to do that. Mr. Yu.
So, just full of shit, dude. She just kills me. Just lies, lies, lies. But, you know, what's so funny about that whole thing is despite all that, right now, out of those guys that she's had, even though she skipped the third debate because she just got tired of getting her ass kicked, because she's got nothing to show. And then it's just that and the Beetlejuice thing and the fact that she's under investigation for assaulting her ex-husband and her son is on criminal trial right now and he's looking at doing serious prison time and she's not even helping him out. She didn't pay for a lawyer. She didn't show. She went to Trump's trial, skipped her kids' hearings. Her kid doesn't even have a lawyer at this point, the last I heard. And he's trying to get a public defender. So she's cut off her son. And remember, this kid's 18, and he already has a 1 or 2 year old kid because girlfriend couldn't get an abortion because mom's a Republican. Just trash, dude. But despite all that, Lauren Boebert is a massive lead in the 4th Congressional District Republican primary. She's leading the primary right now. 40% of those polled said they'd vote for the Republican Congresswoman. And that's a 35-point lead. So it looks like she's going to win that primary. Yep. Here it is. 40% of those polled said they'd vote for Boebert in June, while 5% said they'd vote for the businessman Peter Yu. 4%. See, so 35 points is the next. Now, I think this is funny because there's an election coming for who's going to be the current position, right? The acting person for the next, whatever it is, 6 or 7 months, right? So that person's going to be in there. Well, they have to elect that person, right? Now, she'll probably win the primary. Part of the reason she's going to win the primary is because these other people don't really have the name recognition she has, and they're being split, voted. But if it was just her and one other person, the anti-Boebert vote would still kick her ass. Because that means 60% or almost over 60% are voting against Boebert. Right around 60%. They're not voting for somebody else. They're voting against her. So now when she goes into the final race, it's going to be her versus the guy who's the acting incumbent versus the Democrat. Then it's going to be like, does she really have a shot? We'll see. I mean, she might pull it out, but it's going to be a rough, close election.
Well, that's a rough road because after they just elected a particular person to be doing it for their district, are they going to unelect them to re-elect her?
Yeah, and do it again.
And this is only 40% of the people polled said that they were going to vote for her. Well, that's less than half of the people even polled. So what about the other 60%? They're going to vote for all these other people. How many of them will flock to her versus how many of them will say, hey, that guy we just elected, he sounds good.
Right.
You know?
Right. And that's the thing is whoever they just elected or will elect here at the end of June, honestly, I mean, you almost never see that person not get reelected. And when you have somebody who's coming in to fill in for somebody who left office or went to jail or died or whatever it was, they almost, once they get either appointed or elected into that position, they almost never don't get reelected. And the reason is because everybody goes to the ballot and votes for them. And then, of course, you're coming back again and you're getting the same vote. And you're like, well, didn't I just vote for this freaking guy? And then you check it again. I mean, I know that's how I do it when I get my voter. And it's like, didn't I just vote for that person like 5 months ago? Yes. I don't want to have to make this decision twice. I'm not even going to read up on the other person.
Right.
But yeah. So, I mean, she can still pull it out. You never know. You never know. I don't really have an opinion. I don't know enough about local politics there to make an assessment. I just think it's funny. Miss, I've done nothing in 3.5, almost 4 years she's been in office. She got her GED like 3 months before she joined office. Both of her restaurants are closed now. She drove those into the ground. She's going through the massive divorce, the Beetlejuice scandal, assaulting the ex-husband, or she allegedly assaulted the ex-husband.
I was going to say, let's not forget about the whether or not she hit her ex-husband or not.
Right. Son's about to go to jail for ID theft and a bunch of other shit. mean, Colorado, you make us proud. Oh, man. Kills me. Anyway, so that's Lauren. We might get lucky, though. She might win, and then we'll have 4 more years of making fun of her. Or at least 2 more years before she has to run again.
Oh, goody.
Oh, yay us. I don't think it's worth the trade-off. I'd rather her just lose.
No, I don't think so. Besides, there's always Marjorie Greene.
Oh, yeah. Katie Britt and Christina. Oh, there's a laundry list of nutbags on the right that we can make fun of. Anyway, well, that's our show for today. Where can everybody catch you, Lace?
All right, you can all catch me at mysensewithsense.com. You can find information about workshops, courses I teach, articles I've written. If you have questions about any of those things, you can email us, or you can send us clips. You can send us articles, topic requests, or invite yourself on the show. And where can they email us, Duncan?
Yeah, email us at gossipfinancead@outlook.com. That's down below. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll catch you next time.